Disney shills are out in force today, fake praising the Wokalite the same way they are every other time one of these anti-fan projects is released. Good thing is after tonight, they'll all crawl back under their rocks until the next woke/feminist crap fest is released.
The director has no idea what she's doing and made the show about her feelings and what she believes is right for this franchise. More and more, they keep destroying these franchises by not doing what the fans want.
There is a fire in space where there's no oxygen and the flame is flickering due to space wind.
I'll be surprised if Disney even airs all the episodes.
In The Acolyte, the Force is a metaphor for cultural hegemonic power. The Jedi are a metaphor for cisgender white oppressors who hoard the power for themselves.
I think I despise every single thing about Star Wars now. Like, there's nothing even remotely worthwhile about this franchise anymore. It's anti-entertainment. Hey, what's up, people of the internet? Welcome to the very first episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, something that we're describing as a celebration of cinema, uploaded straight to the place that hates it the most, the internet. This is our first episode. We're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it. My name is Corey. I'm here with my co-host, Shane. Shane, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. It is blazing hot here in Texas, probably blazing hot in Florida where you are too.
I have a sweatshirt on, but we are in the seventh circle of hell here. It is truly awful. So
the worst time of the year, but the best time to be watching things indoors.
Yeah, the month of June is really it. We're pretty excited about a lot of the stuff that's coming out, both theatrically and on television. So, but this is our first episode. So, what would a good first episode be if we didn't have some form of mission statement? And Shane, I'm going to toss this very pivotal, key, important moment that sets the tone and the timbre for our entire existence on the internet to you.
Okay. So the best way I would describe what we're trying to do on this channel is to provide more of a fair critique of movies and television on its own merits, without clickbait, without screaming, without external factors influencing our decisions, just reviewing things on their own. And while that may not take off on, the hashtag algorithm, we think enough people will appreciate that type of an approach, and we hope you'll keep watching. So if you enjoy it, like, subscribe, tell your friends. We are brand new, so there's like maybe 3 of you watching right now, but 3 people tell 3 people. It's organic growth.
Let's do the math here. So there's my mom, my dad, your mom, your dad, significant others. That's like 6 right there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
I mean, we've done this before in the past, and we've had videos that didn't hit that many views. So praise the Google deities for getting us out there. So no, man, I think it's a perfect way of saying it. Believe it or not, folks, the internet, for everything great that it has provided to us, it has also become an echo chamber for a lot of nonsense. And we're here to talk about movies and TV and not talk about external forces that might get in the way and make these movies and shows either better received or not as well received as they could be, just because of something an actor said or something a showrunner said or something that goes along with that. From a credentials standpoint, we do have to prove our worth here. Shane, you went to film school.
I did.
I have no credentials whatsoever. I'm just a guy who likes movies and likes to ramble on and sound like an idiot. So for today's episode, the very first one, we're betraying our namesake already. And we're talking about television. If you couldn't tell by the gigantic banner that's behind the two of us right now, big week in the Star Wars universe, a franchise that seems to be allergic to theatrical exhibition since 2019's Rise of Skywalker. We are here to talk about The Acolyte, which just premiered this week on Disney Plus with its first 2 episodes. It's directed and showrun by Leslie Headland, who's famous for Netflix's Russian Doll. Stars Amandla Stenberg and Lee Jung-jae as the 2 lead roles. It's going to be an 8-episode series. We've only seen the first 2 episodes, which first rant, reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. They give out 4 episodes to the critics, and there's
and only 2 for us.
Very silly, which we can get into the state of film criticism thing. But
true.
Shane, I'd love to pass it over to you, man. You've seen the first 2 episodes; it's fresh in your mind. before we dive into any details and spoilers, what are your first impressions on the show?
Yeah, well, I'll start out by saying this is probably the perfect thing that exemplifies our mission statement, because this show has, I think, as of recording this, has a 94% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 39% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So the dichotomy couldn't be more clear. And this seems to happen anytime there's anything new Star Wars. Nobody hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. So, but overall, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's perfect, and we'll get into what we dislike and dislike later. But I'm a notoriously picky reviewer of things, as you always bash me for.
Yeah,
But
this
I
is true.
enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of good energy, and the show had a pretty decent pace. I think it's refreshing, at least for me, to watch a Star Wars show that's not like the same 5 characters again over and over and over again. So it's nice that they're trying new things, and like each of these characters has their certain quirks and personalities, and I think they had decent intros. I hope we get more delving into what makes each of them tick in the future, but it's only 2 episodes, so I can't expect that just yet. But overall, I solid start.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I texted you as soon as I was done, and I said it's not perfect. And I think it took until partway through the second episode for it to really kind of grab me and go, "Oh, okay, we're starting to cook here." But I mean, one of the things you said, all fresh, all new characters, new intros, new timeline. The shackles of the Skywalker saga are off of this generation of Star Wars storytelling here.
Yeah.
Which I think is the most fascinating thing about it, is that it feels like Star Wars, but it also doesn't feel like Star Wars, because there's just like a little bit that's different here and there. And at first that was jarring to me, but then as I started to watch more of the show, I started to go, wait a minute, this is awesome. They had to design all new costumes, all new ships, all new planets. Everything has to be just that little bit different. Like even the Jedi Temple on Coruscant looks different than it does in the prequel trilogy. So, first impressions, very excited about it. I have been since it was first announced. Anything that's a mystery thriller with a murder involved is right up my alley. And then setting it in a time period that I'm familiar with, because I've read some of the books. I know you're not, so that's an interesting dynamic that we've got here on the show tonight. But yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. Cautiously optimistic, I guess, is probably the
cautious optimism is how I approach all Star Wars things nowadays.
And why is that, Shane? Please tell me where that comes from.
I'm not going down that rabbit hole too far yet, but no, I think like in terms of how it relates to other Star Wars shows, I think there's a clear difference in aesthetic between it and any other non-Andor show, just because they used real sets. Like it's no coincidence that The Acolyte and Andor are both the best looking Star Wars shows, except for I think Mando season 1 looks awesome because Greg Fraser shot it. And, after he left, like they didn't know how to shoot on the volume anymore. He's like the only guy who can make it work in Hollywood, apparently. But it's nice to see, like, literally straight from the get-go, she's walking through like a real set. She walks into a room with like aliens everywhere. It's like, okay, like this feels a lot more dynamic than like 3 people on a volume set not moving.
Yep. No, I wholeheartedly agree. I noticed one part in the second episode where I was like, okay, so they're outside and then they transition to an interior.
Yeah.
And then it goes back outside. And you can feel the depth to those sets because of the fact that they're not standing on a volume. And for those who are uninitiated, a volume set is basically a giant circle. And the whole thing is filled with LED walls. And that allows the filmmakers to create environments in previs before the show gets shot. So the actors have something to work off of instead of a blue screen or a green screen, which is something that the Star Wars prequels were infamous for being filmed that way. So it's a great filmmaking technology. However, in the instance of, say, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that released a couple years back, there are a lot of scenes where it's very obvious that characters are running in a circle. Or if you watch Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, same thing. They have like a little lean to themselves because they're literally running around in a circle the whole time because they're on a volume set. In a show like this, when you build massive sets or something like Andor, you can go. You can do long tracking shots. You can transition from inside to outside, or like the opening fight scene of the series where Amanda Stenberg's character's tussling with Carrie Ann Moss.
And they actually touch things.
They touch
she
things.
knocks over the table. Like none of that happens on a volume set. Nobody
use
touches
the staircase
anything.
to change elevation. There's actual elevation. It's not just flat, you know. So I do think the volume has its place, and I'm not here to disparage that technology in any way, shape, or form, especially if TV budgets are going to be smaller moving forward, as it seems like they're going to, because a lot of streaming companies are realizing the juice is not 100% worth the squeeze when you're spending $200 million on one season of television and then charging $7 a month to watch it. But I do think that having that real tangible feel is a big plus for both this and a show like Andor. So I'd love to hear from you, though. You mentioned all the new characters. Did any of them stick out to you? Who did you like? Who didn't you like?
I mean, I like the lead. I think what's interesting, and maybe this is a dislike too, as well as a like, but Amanda Stenberg as Osha, I really like, but I think her performance as May is not nearly as good.
Interesting. Okay.
She plays a really good, charismatic, like good guy, but then like a kind of token bad guy. So it's fine because the bad guy is not the lead of the show. Like when she is the lead, I think she's pretty compelling.
Okay.
I love Master Soul as well. Like I think Lee, I'm gonna say this right, Lee Jong-jae. Is that right?
Yep, okay, you got it.
I think he had to have like studied Qui-Gon or something, because he almost plays the same character as Qui-Gon, right? Because it's like a Jedi Master who's like, he's not fully gonna listen. He's not fully bought in. He's not drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yep.
And I think that's good because you kind of see both sides of him, where he tells, one character like, I don't know if she did it or not. And then he goes to her and he's like, oh, I believe you. You didn't do it. Right? Like, so he's kind of toting the party line, but then he does his own thing too. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves as it goes along. But he's got like a nice, like fatherly smile that he gives a lot, and like he fits that role so well.
Well, he gives it to Osha. He doesn't give it to Jecki, who's his current Padawan.
Yeah.
he clearly has an affinity for Osha, and I think he sees her as a failure of his because she left the Jedi Order. I think they say 6 years ago when the show starts, which I'm curious to see exactly why she ended up leaving the Order, because we've seen this in Star Wars before. There's a whole run in the Clone Wars where Ahsoka Tano leaves the Jedi Order. The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker, it's time for the Jedi to end. There's a lot of instances in this universe where we see characters that are Jedi or that are training to become them kind of be in a moral quandary as to whether or not that's the right path for them. So I am curious to see, as the show develops, where that path was and then where it's going to go, because I'm sure they're going to do some flashbacks at some point.
Yeah, I think that's already kind of confirmed because of trailer shots of characters way younger than they were in the show,
like Master Torben, perhaps.
Yeah, right. that poor receding hairline,
man, and the beard. I mean, as a member of the bearded community, that little glued on thing that they had on him was certainly something. But I really like Sol, though, and the big Qui-Gon moment for me with him was when he's sitting in the cockpit of the ship and he's talking to Verdestra over the holo, and he's like, let's go get him, and she's like, no, we have to convene as a council and we need to strategize, and he's like, no, we don't. We need to go take action. Like he feels very much like a Qui-Gon, not just from the movie Phantom Menace, but also from some of the books that have come out that kind of paint Qui-Gon as a little bit of a rebel within the Jedi Order as well. So pretty cool stuff there. How about the fellow from The Good Place, Jason Mendoza. He plays Kimir, who's May's shifty smuggler friend
Oh
in the
yes,
second
got it.
episode.
Yeah.
What do you think about him? I
I
feel like
think
there's
he's
more to
fun.
him than meets the eye.
Yeah, there has to be more to him, right? I hope there is. Like, it doesn't seem right that he would only be in like that one episode as a throwaway character, but
Sure.
maybe. It's hard to say. I really liked Yord too. He's like
Have you seen
the
the thing
Boy
on Twitter?
Scout.
The Yord Horde.
Yord Horde.
That's his fan base, the Yord Horde.
I love the the Boy Scout mentality where he's like, I'm gonna do everything by the book all the time, and I think his arc is probably that's gonna get him burned if he does that. I would think.
Do you mean like Anakin Skywalker burned, or just like in a metaphorical sense?
That would be an interesting twist of fate. But
gosh, it sure would. Did you notice with him very early on in the first episode, May is fighting Master Indara, and she takes her lightsaber out, and May says, "A Jedi only ignites their lightsaber when they intend to kill."
Yeah.
Yord ignited his lightsaber like 3 or 4 times in the first 2 episodes.
Yeah. I think that dynamic is interesting though, because I think this is the first Star Wars we've seen where lightsabers are like not a big thing. Like they only ignite them when they need to. And so you get a lot of hand-to-hand combat, which we haven't seen a lot of in Star Wars. It kind of feels, I think it's cool because Star Wars has been, like this channel for like Asian cinema into Western cinema. Like that's always been the thing. It's the Eastern and the Western combined, with all the Kurosawa influences and stuff, but it's also kind of a Western kind of, and they went a step further here, right? And they put in, Kung Fu and all that stuff, more Asian influence into Star Wars, which I find hilarious when people are like, this doesn't belong in Star Wars. It's like, you realize the Jedi are like samurai, right? Like that's the whole point, is you're taking Asian influence into this world. And so more of that, I think, is fine. I think it's good.
Well, Shane, internet bad.
Internet bad.
That's half of the name of this show, and we're proving it here. While we're on the topic of that, the people are really latching on to the fire in outer space thing.
Yeah, it's almost like it's not real.
Ugh. Fictional television, folks.
It is so hilarious. Like, do they think they're watching Star Trek or something? Like, Star Trek has always been the more, and it's not really, but it's always been more of like the science-y show. Like they try and keep things grounded in maybe what could happen in the future. Star Wars has never been that. Like,
never.
Nothing about Star Wars makes sense from like a physics perspective, like hyperspace, or the X-Wings have wings for space, but like there's no air in space. I guess you could argue that like they're flying in space and on land too, but like they're banking and stuff. Like that's not how spaceships work. And like, what are we doing here? Why are we complaining about fire? Like it doesn't, none of the Star Wars physics makes sense. I don't know why this is suddenly a problem.
Well, it wasn't.
I know
it's
why
not suddenly a problem. 2017 happened, and bombs got dropped in outer space.
That's right.
And
that's
the
right.
same people that were upset there are upset here, which is kind of hilarious. But in the interest of fairness, we're being far too nice, and I think we need to start being a little bit meaner. So, what didn't gel with you from these first couple episodes?
I don't know if this is an intentional choice or not. I have not seen Russian Doll, and so I don't know how the dialogue works in that show. But it felt like, to me, they were almost trying to channel the prequel dialogue with like wooden, stoic type of dialogue.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that everyone hates about the prequels is the dialogue. So like, I get that they're trying to bridge that gap, but it's also bad. Like the dialogue, not in every scene. Like I think, especially in some of the more dynamic, like more intense scenes, it works just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like some of the intro scenes, and like everyone is going to harp on the exact same scene because the second it happened, millions of people rolled their eyes because Yord is like explaining to Osha her backstory. It's like the number one rule in exposition is don't tell a character something they already know just for the audience, because it's super obvious. right? And so he's saying like, your whole family died in a fire and you were kicked out of the Jedi Order. It's like, she knows this. Like, why is he telling her this? I don't understand.
Yeah.
It
I,
happens
I
way too
watched
much in modern media.
I watched Russian Doll just last week to get ready for this because I was curious to see what does a Leslie Headland run show look and feel like. And the dialogue is quite a bit sharper on that show than it was on this. But that one also takes place in a modern setting where
Yeah.
they can use a little more modern slang.
Yeah.
And it also has Natasha Lyonne as the lead, who is ridiculously charismatic. That being said, the fellow who plays Yord is the second lead in that show.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the lady who plays Vernestra in this also
Mhm.
has a role of decent size in
Okay.
Russian Doll as well. So, good old Hollywood nepotism that every single director that has ever existed is guilty of. Don't go after James Gunn alone, folks, or Martin Scorsese or Christopher Nolan. They all use the same actors all the time.
Yeah.
It's just part of the way that this world works. But yeah, the dialogue was one thing that there were a couple bits of it that felt a little off-putting to me. The thing I honestly liked the least of the entire run so far is that both episodes, they just hit the credits
Yeah.
seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Uh,
It didn't
Very
build to
strange.
like an ending cliffhanger type thing. I mean, maybe with the Wookiee, but it it didn't feel like that, typical big swell of music and then dun, or
Right.
some big moment and then ends. It just kind of ended,
Yep. And
and
the
that
music, I
slows
think,
down the momentum for sure.
like you're saying, it hits the credits. And normally when you see the field of space and the blue font, you're hearing the Star Wars fanfare,
Right,
right?
right,
Here it was just kind of like dark, ominous,
yeah.
forgetting Sarah Marshall tones or whatever. And it just something about that felt a little bit off. And part of that makes me wonder if this is kind of following more of the it's a 5 hour long movie structure that a lot of the Disney Plus shows have followed,
Yeah,
whether it's an
I
Obi-Wan or Falcon and the Winter Soldier or
I hope
whatever.
it's not, because like this is I think the first Star Wars thing that we've gotten where I mean, maybe no, Obi-Wan the writer was a movie writer. The
Uh-huh.
first Star Wars thing we've gotten where it's like TV to TV, right? Like Leslie Headland did
Yep.
a TV show before this. Now she is doing TV for this.
Yep.
Mandalorian was Jon Favreau, who did movies. Obi-Wan was the writer was Joby Harold.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking more
TV
writers than
director,
directors, or
movie writer, right? Yeah.
yes. What are the other one? Book of Boba Fett's Favreau again.
And Robert Rodriguez, who's a movie guy.
Yeah, I guess Filoni came from TV, but animated to live action, slightly different.
Uh-huh.
Especially because the animated shows were like 30 episodes or something, and Ahsoka was what, like 6 or 7 or something? Was it
Eight, I
more?
think.
Was
I
it
think
8?
eight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, still, either way, these are very condensed TV windows. It's
Uh-huh.
not like, it feels like everything's a limited series now. The only one that's been kind of actual length has been Andor, and that's
Yeah.
the best one.
12,
So it's
12
like those,
episodes,
yeah,
hour-long episodes every
it
time,
had
just
time to
about.
breathe, had time to build, and it's getting a second season, which nothing else is, or I guess Mando. But still, these little limited time events just seem odd to me.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange, and it feels like they're just barreling towards the next thing sometimes, which I know that's a George Lucasism, the whole faster, more intense
Yeah,
idea. But when you have TV and it's long form story instead of short term story, I think you can stretch things out a little
yeah,
bit more, and
and like
hopefully it does.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can see it in other shows too, and I hope maybe we get some of that in this show, where like, not necessarily bottle episodes, where episodes where the plot doesn't really advance too much, but we dive deeper into something. So like, a couple of examples are like The Last of Us with the Bill and Frank episode,
Yes,
where
yes, yes.
that's an hour long, where we're kind of stepping aside and just telling this little short story in the middle of our
A
show.
total detour.
Mythic Quest did this on a couple episodes, and
Mhm.
those are the best episodes, is those little asides where you tell your own self-contained story in that episode. If you watch anything Damon Lindelof, he does this all the time, where he'll introduce a character and then he'll have a whole backstory episode for that character later on in the season. And so like that type of stuff is what I think we're missing with these limited time, like limited series type of shows.
Sure.
We're not diving enough into what works with TV. The whole point of television is it's longer form. You get a lot more time to tell your story.
Yep.
But if you're only doing, 8 30-minute episodes, it's almost like just a longer movie at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And like they bring in a lot of movie talent to do it. And
Yep.
then like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, yeah, because you brought people that are used to making a 2.5-hour movie and you told them make a 5-hour movie.
Right.
And then it just doesn't work the way that television should work. They're two completely different.
And the checklist is action, action, action.
Yeah.
Character beats, more action, because we have to satisfy the fans of the genre. Right. But with a show like this, with a show like Andor, I do have hope, because these are shows that are put together by complete writers' rooms. It's not just one person writing every single episode of the show. And they said they put together, for this particular writers' room, a handful of original trilogy people, a handful of prequel folks, a handful of sequel fans, and then one writer who was not familiar with Star Wars in any way, shape, or form, who was basically there to keep them in check so that it didn't turn into like a cameo fest, or
imagine that.
The one word on this show that's going to be banned forever, which is badass, right? It doesn't have to be overly badass all the time for it to be successful. You can have those moments, but the moments of character and levity in between are what strengthen all of those moments to come. So that's my hope for the show moving forward, is that it focuses on those important character beats, while also maintaining the fantastic action that we've seen in the first show. So,
and this gets me maybe down a tangent a little bit, but like I feel like the Star Wars fandom just wants fan films, right? Like whenever anything deviates at all, or like for example, the actor of Yord said in an interview, he misspoke and he said Anakin blew up the Death Star instead of Luke.
How dare he?
And the internet was like, these people don't know Star Wars. They should never be allowed to make anything Star Wars again. Like, have you seen the interviews with Harrison Ford where he's like, did Han shoot first? He's like, I don't care.
I don't care.
Being an actor, you don't need to know the source material back to front in order to understand or play your character. And in some ways, not being familiar with it is what's going to make Star Wars more fresh.
Yep.
Right? Like having that writer in the room that has never seen any Star Wars helps, because that writer is there strictly for story, character, plot, beats. And everyone else can talk about like what's Star Wars, what's not Star Wars, but this person's just going to care about the story, right?
Exactly.
And there needs to be more of that. Like Tony Gilroy, who did Andor, famously does not like Star Wars.
Yep.
But he created a great story within this universe. And I would argue he's very faithful to the canon and the lore and all that stuff, right? Like he is following the timeline how he can. Yep. But he's making his own thing, and it was compelling. And I think we need more of those voices. And yet every single time that anything like that comes up, the fandom's like, no, you don't know what the fans want. And it's like, if the fans got what they wanted at all times, it would be boring, right? Because it's almost like, I don't know, like, hey, drugs or something.
George Lucas knew what the fans wanted back in 1977 when the first Star Wars came out.
Right. Like he was just making something that he liked and enjoyed and thought maybe enough people could connect with it, right?
All anyone ever says when they talk about their experience seeing Star Wars for the first time, whether their entry point was A New Hope or Phantom Menace or Force Awakens or Mandalorian or whatever, is I was just blown away because I had never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then don't bitch and moan about how all you want to see is the same old thing over and over and over and over and over again. Like, are lightsabers cool? Yeah. Is the Force cool? Yeah. But so is other stuff. So is like good dialogue and a good story. Like the action sequences are there to supplement the writing and the arcs and the beats that happen that make those action sequences meaningful. If you don't have those, it just turns into a Michael Bay movie which is just shit blowing up for the sake
Yeah.
of shit blowing up, right?
Yeah. And like that's kind of why I always go into Star Wars nowadays with that sort of cautious optimism,
Yep.
is because so many of these shows have devolved into like, how many cameos can we put in, because that's what the fans are demanding.
Right.
And none of them are like focusing on what story do we want to tell. It feels like you're working backwards, right? Like a movie or a show should come from like the bottoms up, right? You have this idea and this passionate filmmaker who is going to make something that interests them, and then maybe you slot that into a franchise, right? Or like, but it comes from within. It comes from like an emotion or a feeling that they have, and that's what makes it compelling, is because you're saying, here's how I feel, and I think a lot of other people feel that way. Like George Lucas, I really like these old serials and these old, Flash Gordon, so I want to make something like that, but in space and all of that stuff. And maybe it won't take off, but maybe it will. And then of course here we are, right? Star Wars is massive, right? Because enough people connected with what George connected to.
Yep.
But it feels like now with a lot of these shows, it's the opposite. It's like, we need corporate think tank Boba Fett show. Everyone's demanding a Boba Fett show. So now we're going to find somebody to make the Boba Fett show. Or
Josh
we've got
Trank.
Obi-Wan show. It just feels backwards, right? Like the fans need this, so we're going to find somebody to do this. Like the Obi-Wan show went through so many writers throughout the process. It's like, let somebody pitch an idea, right? Like you don't have to say, like, we need the Obi-Wan show, come recruit like, writers or directors to do it. It's like Marvel, right? We need Captain America Volume 18. Go find indie director, slot them in.
Yeah, they're hired guns, right?
Yeah.
At that point, they need a good script. If they
And
have
Star
a good
Wars
script,
was never that to begin with. It was one guy who was like, I'm really passionate about this thing, and he did it.
Yep.
So I'm all for new voices, different voices, get people in here to tell their own stories in this universe. And so I'm happy that we're getting that in the Acolyte, in Andor, in that type of stuff.
And not at the same time, especially in this show, it's got that pulpy Star Warsy. There's aliens everywhere,
and the wipes, like they have the aesthetic down super well.
I mean, for anybody, because this has been like a time-honored debate, is whether or not something feels like Star Wars. To me, this does. I think it might not to the next guy, and whatever. That's their opinion, and they're entitled to have it, and I don't care. Drop a comment below whether you agree or disagree. But look at me slamming the YouTube here.
Like, subscribe, tell your friends.
Tell your friends, whatever. We actually don't really care if you tell your friends, but yeah, does it feel like Star Wars? To me, yes, it does. It checks a whole lot of those boxes while also introducing something new. It's something that, at least for right now, feels a little bit smaller in scale, which I also like, because not everything has to be blow up this space station or else the universe is doomed forever.
Yep.
Right. If this is a smaller story, so be it. That's great. Yep. Just tell me a good story, make it look pretty, have it sound good. That's all I need. So.
Yeah. No, what I think, to me, it definitely felt like Star Wars. It looks like the prequels, but with more actual sets and more. And maybe that's where people are getting a little bit maybe not turned off, but like confused. Is like the prequel aesthetic was all green screens, so like it's hard to do the aesthetic in real life to match exactly. So there's a little bit of a clash there. I think if people are confused about the kung fu and the hand-to-hand combat, I can see that not feeling distinctly like Star Wars because it's not been in Star Wars before. But I think it works. It was a little bit in Ahsoka too, and nobody complained about it then, right? Like,
well, because
Dave Filoni was writing it, right? It depends on who the showrunner is. We'll complain about it here, but not here.
I don't dislike Dave Filoni in any way, shape, or form. I'm very down the middle of the road on his project. I've liked some of them. I've not been too keen on others. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously, that's a bias, right? That you see
exactly.
People, oh, it's this person making it. It's going to be good. Hayden's in it. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
it's not a guarantee that it's going to
Yeah.
be good just because someone's in it.
Yeah.
Like
Agree.
it helps and it makes it gets you excited for it. But if the script isn't there, if the direction isn't there, if all the like making movies and TV is so difficult, and this because you went
Yeah.
to film school, you've made short films before. Like just trying to put all that together, there's so many moving parts that anything that comes out is like right next to a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like us in the void on the internet, the worst place in the universe, talking about this kind of stuff, like who cares, man? At the end of the day, this stuff is cool. Somebody got to make it. It's their job to make it. They get to make a living off that kind of stuff. And we get to sit down on our couch for 30 or 45 minutes once a week to escape from real life to see it. Fine by me.
Yeah. No, I think overall I'm pretty positive on the show. My other main little critique dislike is I think the intro of like the big bad was not great. His voice cadence just kind of weird, and he was just kind of standing there and just ignited his lightsaber for no reason. And in like a series that's known for its like great bad guys, it just felt like a weird intro to that. But maybe he's a nobody. I don't know. That was
Hard
my
to
only
say.
other.
Could be Plagueis, could be Tenebris, could be a nobody, right? Sometimes a guy in a helmet is just a guy in a helmet. Which
Who was the big bad in Marvel that everyone kept thinking was gonna show up everywhere?
Mephisto,
yeah. That's that's how I feel about it. Like everyone's gonna speculate that this is some, who is this character, and it's just some guy.
I mean, and if it is just some guy, if the story's good, then who cares? Right?
Yeah, I think there's a problem with like setting your expectations for one thing and then not getting it and being upset about that. And I think that plagues Star Wars a lot because fans are like, they have this vision of what something should be, and when it's not exactly that, it's instead of like, oh, maybe I like that more, it's immediately bad, bad.
Yep.
No chances at all. So
if it's
I think
not Plagueis, the show is a failure.
Exactly, right?
Ruined.
Like, yeah, or like, if Yoda doesn't show up, people are going to be mad, and stuff like that. Like, just keep an open mind, see what they do with it, take the story on its own merits, and go along for the ride.
Yeah, Yoda exists in this time period. However,
we're gonna see him
in all the books. They talk about him all the time, but he's never there. He's always off doing taking the younglings on a Force exploration or going off and doing this sabbatical thing or whatever. Like, they all have fond memories of him, and he's all taught them a bunch of stuff, but he's not the spotlight of the era. It's these other characters, and let those other characters have their moment to shine.
I would like this show more if we did not get Yoda than if we got Yoda, because it would be bolder to me. Like,
I agree with you.
They can't resist. He's gonna show up. Like, I just have accepted that as my fate. Like, he's gonna show up in some episode, and everyone's gonna go crazy because it's Yoda, or they're gonna be like, "This is not Yoda," because whatever.
It's not my Yoda.
Yeah,
it's Jake Yoda.
Jake Yoda. But anyways,
so should we wrap it up?
I think we should. I can probably tangent for a long time, but we've got more episodes of this to review in the future.
Yeah.
So
maybe one day, if we have a Patreon page or something, we can do longer videos that we charge people money for, and we can swindle them out of their hard-earned cash.
I can do a 75-minute rant on The Last Jedi
by yourself.
By myself.
Just screaming into the.
I don't even dislike The Last Jedi. I just thought it would be appealing. Put it behind a paywall and get everyone to. Yeah. Anyways.
Cool. Well, I think somehow we made it. Our internet didn't cut out. I don't think there's too much that we have to cut or edit, other than the fact that it's getting dark out, and I keep getting darker as the show keeps going on. Lesson learned for next time, folks. If there is a next time, and if there is, we don't know what we're talking about yet. So you're just going to have to hit that little subscribe button and turn on your notifications. So that way, when something else comes out, you can see what it is. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Let us know what your thoughts are on The Acolyte, whether you liked it, whether you didn't like it, What do you think about the state of Star Wars? What do you think about the state of film criticism? Is Rotten Tomatoes the end all be all of everything in the universe akin to Wikipedia for movies? Who knows? I don't know, but tell us what you think. You can follow us on Twitter. Shane, what is our Twitter handle? I know we have one.
MGIB show.
There you go. All
because
one word.
Movies Good Internet Bad was too long for the username.
Yeah.
So it is
Thanks,
called
Elon.
Movies Good Internet Bad, but the handle is different.
And because of that, we're going to call it Twitter and not X. So there you go. Boom.
Damn it, Elon.
Yeah. So that's going to wrap things up. We will see you guys in the next one, and hopefully you're here for the long haul with us. But I'm Corey. That's been Shane, and we'll see you next time.